could solve?
Question?
Yeah. And the answer is yes. And it's an easy thing to figure out. You sit on your bed one morning and say, okay, there's some things that need to be done that I don't want to do, that I could do, that would make things better by the end of the day. What are they?
Question?
Practice domain. There are things that are within your grasp that you could fix. Fix them, and you'll learn. It will make you grow very, very rapidly, and then you'll be able to sort out more complex problems without making them worse. Well, my sense is that if you want to change the world, you start from yourself and work out, because you build your competence that way. It's like, I don't know how you can go out and protest the structure of the entire economic system if you can't keep your room organized.
Yeah, isn't that an issue with people, though, that they always want to enact some sort of control over the outside world when their inside is all fucked up?
Well, I think there's some truth in that. I think there is truth in that. I mean, people try to change the outside world for lots of ways, but many of those ways aren't just pure good. I was trying to produce something that was a counterposition to this idea that what you should do is go out and fix up other people. You know, that's just not right. And there's a New Testament line about that, something about, you know, not worrying too much about the speck in your neighbor's eye when you have a log in your eye. It's like, yes, no kidding, yes, no kidding, yes, no kidding, yes, 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 no kidding, yes, no kidding, yes, no kidding, yes, 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 no kidding. Let's say you want to sort out your room and beautify it. And let's say that all you have is just a little room, like you're not rich, but you've got your damn room and you've got this space right in front of you that's a part of the cosmos that you can come to grips with. Well, a room is a place to sleep. And so if you set your room up properly, then you figure out how to sleep and when you should sleep and how you should sleep. And you figure out when you should wake up. And then you figure out, well, what clothes you should wear, because they have to be arranged properly in your dresser. And then you have to have some place to put your clothes. If you're going to have some clothes, you have to figure out what you're going to wear those clothes to do, right? And then that means you have to figure out what you're going to do. And then your room has to serve that purpose, because otherwise it doesn't set up properly. And if it doesn't serve your purposes, you will be unhappy and not happy in the room, because the way that we perceive the world is as a place to move from point A to point B in. And so what it means to set up your room is that you have to have somewhere to go that's worthwhile. The next thing is, well, maybe you have to make it beautiful. But that's not easy, right? That means you have to have some taste. And that doesn't mean you have to have money. It doesn't. Because you can be garish with money, and you can be tasteful with nothing. You have to be creative in order to do that. So then to beautify your room means that you also have to develop your capacity to be creative. And so then you can make your room shine. But then what will happen is that if your family isn't together, they will interfere with that. And you start building this little microcosm of perfection. It'll evoke all the pathologies of everyone in your household. They'll wonder what the hell you're up to in there. And they won't necessarily be happy, because if they're in a lowly place, the higher you move out of that, the more the place they're in looks bad. And you might say, well, what they should do is celebrate your victory over chaos and evil, but that isn't what will happen. What will happen instead is that they will attempt to pull you back down. And so what that means is that if you organize your room, then you're going to have to confront the devils in your house. And that's often a terrifying thing, because some of those devils have lineages that go back many, many generations. And God only knows what you have to struggle with in order to overcome that. And so to sort yourself out and to fix up your room is a non-trivial matter, you know. We need to know who the competent people are, and we need to reward them. And even more importantly, we need to tell young people, hey, there's some hierarchies of competence out there. Like 1,000 of them. Go be a plumber, man. But be a good one, you know? Be an honest one. Because otherwise all you do is go out there and cause trouble. We don't need people to cause more trouble. We need people to solve problems. Solve problems. We need people to solve problems. Solve problems. Solve problems. We don't need people to cause more trouble. We need people to solve good one, you know? Tradesman, and you can make a lot of money as a tradesperson. It's a bloody, reliable, honorable, forthright, productive way of making a living. And there is a hell of a lot of difference between a working man who knows what he's doing and one who doesn't. Both in terms of skill and ethics, right? And you work with someone who knows what they're doing, it's a bloody pleasure. They tell you what they're going to do. They tell you how much it will cost. They go and do it, it works, and you pay them. Perfect. Everyone's happy. And that's what happens when you have genuine hierarchies of competence. Human beings don't want utopian comfort and certainty. They want adventure and chaos and uncertainty. And so that the very notion of a utopia was anti-human, because we're not built for static utopia. We're built for
by past events.
Dynamic situations.
And therefore, we tend to regard ourselves as the puppets of the past, as driven along by something that is always behind us. Now, to overcome this impression, it's very simple. You begin again with an experiment. Approach the world through your ears. If you shut your eyes and make contact with reality purely with your ears, and you will realize that the sounds you are hearing are all coming out of silence. You hear, and it fades away. Fades, 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 and finally disappears. It's a curious world, this, isn't it? Because you hear all the realities in it. The sounds, suddenly coming out of nothing. You don't see any reason for them to begin. They just appear, and then they echo away through the corridors of the mind, which we call memory. Now, if you open your eyes, it's a little harder to see this with your eyes because, unlike sounds, the eyes sound static. Or rather, they look static. Everything looks still to your eyes. But you must understand, the world you are looking at, say when you look at a light, that light is vibrating. All material things are vibrations, and they are vibrating at you now in the same way as the sound is vibrating on your ears. In other words, the present world that you see is a vibration coming Just as the sound comes out of silence, the light is coming out of space. It's coming out of nothing straight at you now and echoing away into the past. So the course of time is really very much like the course of a ship in the ocean. Because here's the ship, you see, and it leaves behind it a wake. And the wake fades out, and that tells us where the ship has been, in just the same way as the past and our memory of the past tells us what we have done. But as we go back into the past, and we go back and back to prehistory, and we use all kinds of instruments and scientific methods for detecting what happened, we eventually reach a point where all record of the past fades away in just the same way as the wake of the ship. Now, the important thing to remember in this illustration is that the wake doesn't drive the ship any more than the tail wags the dog.
Yo, check it out, it's Raekwon the Chef, rocking with a Killer the Dawn, you heard? You know what it is, man.
Phil. What I'm saying is I think this. I'm trying to share with you a certain style of life and an attitude to life and an insight. I've taken you on one side and said, listen, kids, things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. Listen, kids, things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. Listen, kids, things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. There's a big deception going on, and you're involved in it, but I just thought you ought to know. I'm terribly puzzled about the way people go out of their way to disenjoy themselves. They take so much trouble about it. And all around you have only to look and you see this perfect passion for making the world look grisly. And it isn't only job builders and garage owners who do this kind of thing, it's also people who profess to be painters. They're actually using excrements for painting in Paris today, on the theory that the world is shot to pieces, and that since the artist is a representative of his times, he ought to show the times as they really are, as a social critic. So he makes the most weird. He paints Campbell's soup cans, and he makes music that shrieks and screams. He just goes out of his way to make it sound as ugly as he possibly can manage. And the ingenuity is about that is endless. Because that is the times. This is critical. See? Listen, kids, things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. Listen, kids, things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. Listen, kids, things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. There's a big deception going on, and you're involved in it, but I just thought you ought to know it. Let's take the character of the Pied Piper, the person who brings you an invitation to dance. I say then, you see, there is going to be a dance this evening, and I would like you all to come. That's the spirit in which I invite you to a seminar. I am not inviting you in the spirit of saying, no, we're going to have to discuss some very grave matters, and you ought to be awake to all these things and arouse your social conscience. When you get through with all that, then what? when you get through with all that, then what? When you get through with feeding the hungry and clothing the naked, and we are making great strides with automation and technology in abolishing poverty totally, then what are we going to do? Then what are we going to do? Well, you see, if you've got all these people clothed and fed and so on, then they say, well, now what next? If you've got a kind of Quakerish state of mind, you don't know what to do. Well, feed and clothe somebody else. Get busy. But then, where is that leading? Listen, kids. Things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. Listen, kids. Things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. Listen, kids. Things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. There's a big deception going on, and you're involved in it, but I just thought you ought to know it. Listen, kids. Things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. Listen, kids. Things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. Listen, kids. Things aren't what they seem. Don't be fooled. There's a big deception going on, and you're involved in it, but I just thought you ought to know it.
The self has thus the capacity to abandon itself, to forget itself, to hide from itself, and thus to make the most completely convincing illusion. But in play. And so the activity, the creative activity of the Godhead in Hinduism is called Leela, which means play. Play. Our word lilt is related to it, I think. But so also in the book of Proverbs, you will find a discourse being given by the divine wisdom. The Lord possessed me in the beginning of his ways before his works of old. Its delight was to rejoice, the King James Bible says, in the presence of God and with the sons of men. But the Hebrew translated rejoice says play. 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 Rejoice is a sort of dignified Elizabethan, but it says play. And St. Thomas, aware of this, said that the divine wisdom was above all to be compared with games, because games are played for their own sake, not for any ulterior motive.
Meaning wave, because music is everything.
And so that is a nice little tangle. If I put this in the language of Oriental philosophy and religion, it would be something like this. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving or desire. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving or desire. One who abandons that desire attains nirvana, which is supreme peace, liberation. Nirvana means in Sanskrit, blow out. That is, exhale the breath. Exhale the breath. The opposite, desire, is to breathe in. Now, if you breathe in and hold it, you lose your breath. But if you breathe out, it comes back to you. It comes back to you. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving or desire. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving or desire. So the principle here is, if you want life, don't cling to it. Let go. Let go. But the problem is, if I desire not to desire, is that not already desire? How can I desire not to desire? How can I surrender myself when myself is precisely an urge to hold on, to cling to life, to continue to survive? To survive. To survive. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving or desire. The Buddha said that wisdom must come only from the abandonment of selfish craving or desire. I can see rationally that by clinging to myself I may strangle myself. I may be like a person who has a bad habit, as a result of which he is committing suicide. And he knows that, but can't give it up, because the means of death are so sweet.
Monks used to keep skulls on their desks. And people nowadays think that was very morbid. Everything's falling apart. So don't try and stop it. When you're falling off a precipice, it doesn't do you any good to hang on to a rock that's falling with you. See? But everything is doing that. And so, again, this is another case of our completely wasting our energy in trying to prevent the world from falling apart.
Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. And then you'll be able to do something interesting with the free energy. 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 Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. When the Hindu says everything is unreal, the Westerner reacts and says, no, you can't treat life as a dream. It's serious, it's real, it's for real. And what do you mean by that? And what do you mean by that? Well, how real do you want it to be? This is, in other words, everything, insofar as it's falling apart, everything is changing, it is like smoke. And we all feel that smoke has a lesser degree of reality than wood. It's an image of the evanescent, of the ghostly. So there's this idea the whole world is this mirage. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's only bad if you cling to it, if you try to lean on it.
But if you don't lean on it, it's a grand illusion. So the word Maya means not only illusion, but it means art, it means magic, and it means creative power. So this is the big act. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. And then you'll be able to do something interesting with the free energy. With the free energy. With the free energy. Don't do it. And it's perhaps easier to feel the world in that way in a tropical country where death is very common and where you just watch things dissolve before your eyes and yet burst out and grow again. The whole world is changing. Maybe easier to think that way than in our environment. Although when you're out in California, the human landscape changes so fast that no town is the same for 2 years. Any mailing list that you have changes 1/3 addresses per annum. Nothing stays put. The hills are shadows and they flow from form to form and nothing stands.
It's a beautiful day to be alive here at the peak of recorded human civilization.
Akira. He's got clout.
And what seems a good thing today turns out tomorrow to have been a disaster. What seemed in the moral and spiritual sphere too, like great virtues in times past, are easily seen today as hideous evil. Let's take, for example, the Inquisition. In its own day, among Catholics, the Holy Inquisition was regarded as we today regard the practice of psychiatry. You see, you feel that in curing a person of cancer, almost anything is justified. The most complex operation, the most weird surgery. People suspended for days and days on end on the end of tubes with X-ray penetration, burning. Or people undergoing shock treatment, people locked in the colorless, monotonous corridors of mental institutions. In all good faith, they knew that witchcraft and heresy were terrible things. Awful plagues, imperiling people's souls forever and ever. So any means were justified to cure people of heresy. We don't change. We don't change. We're doing the same thing today, but under different names. We don't change. We're doing the same thing today, but under different names. We can look back at those people and see how evil that was. But we can't see it in ourselves. So therefore, beware of virtue. We don't. We're doing the same thing today, but under different names. We don't. We're doing the same thing today, under different names. We don't. We're doing the same thing today, but under different names. We don't.
So therefore, beware. Of virtue.
This is Source Wave Radio by Akira the Dawn. You are listening to Flash Vibes.
We white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, British, German, American, have been on a rampage for the past 100 or more years to improve the world. To improve the world. We have given the benefits of our culture, our religion, our technology to everybody, except perhaps the Australian Aborigines. And we have insisted that they receive the benefits of our culture, even our political styles, our democracy. You better be democratic, or we shoot. And having conferred these blessings all over the place, we wonder why everybody hates us. See, because sometimes doing good to others, and even doing good to oneself, is amazingly destructive. Because it's full of conceit. How do you know what's good for other people? How do you know what's good for you? If you say you want to improve, you ought to know what's good for you. But obviously you don't. Because if you did, you would be improved. How do you know what's good for other people? How do you know what's good for you? If you say you want to improve, you ought to know what's good for you. But obviously you don't. Because if you did, you would be improved. So we don't know. It's like the problem of geneticists, which they face today. I went to a meeting of geneticists not so long ago where they gathered in a group of philosophers and theologians and said, now look here, we need help. We now are on the verge of figuring out how to breed any kind of human character we would want to have. We can give you saints, philosophers, scientists, great politicians, anything you want. Just tell us. What kind of human beings want we to be? So, I said, how will those of us who are genetically unregenerate make up our minds what genetically generate people might be? Because I'm afraid, very much, that our selection of virtues may not work. It may be like, for example, this new kind of high-yield grain, which is becoming ecologically destructive. When we interfere with the processes of nature and breed efficient plants and efficient animals, there's always some way in which we have to pay for it. And I can well see that eugenically produced human beings might be dreadful. We could have a plague of virtuous people. You realize that? Do you realize that? Any animal considered in itself is virtuous, does its thing, but in crowds they're awful. Like a crowd of ants or locusts on the rampage. They're all perfectly good animals, but it's just too much. I could imagine a perfectly pestiferous mass of 1 million saints. How do you know what's good for other people? How do you know what's good for you? If you say you want to improve, you ought to know what's good for you. But obviously you don't. Because if you did, you would be improved. How do you know what's good for other people? How do you know what's good for you? what's good for you. But obviously you don't. Because if you did, you would be improved.
So I said to these people, look, there's the only thing you can do. Just be sure that a vast variety of human beings is maintained. Don't please breed us down to a few excellent types. Excellent for what? Excellent for what? We never know how circumstances are going to change and how our need for different kinds of people changes. We may need very individualistic and aggressive people. At another time, we may need very cooperative, team-working people. At another time, we may need people who are full of interest in dexterous manipulation of the external world. At another time, we may need people who explore into their own psychology and are introspective. There is no knowing. The more varieties and the more skills we have, obviously, the better. So you see, here again, the problem comes out in genetics. We do not really know how to interfere with the way the world is. Contrast between the words we use, explicit and implicit. They're very valuable words. What is explicit? What's on the outside? Let's say how we come on publicly. Explicitly, we are thus and so. We have a fight. We're in competition, say, in business, explicitly. But implicitly, we've worked this out. We've agreed in a secret way that nobody knows about that this competition is extremely valuable to both of us. Take it politically, for example. Let's take the situation of Russia versus the United States. Explicitly, in public, this has to be a big fight. These two ways of life, these two ideologies are opposed. They say, no, we are... But behind the scenes, it's all been carefully worked out. You bet it has. That this opposition has to happen. Because our economy depends on it, and their economy depends on it. And everybody knows this, who's smart. But there are a lot of people who get taken in by the propaganda, and they should be taken in because that makes the thing work. It's crazy. But that's the way it goes. 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 And everything works this way. When swans start to mate, they're not sure what they're supposed to do. And they begin to fight. I had a long talk about this with C.G. Jung. He lived on the edge of Lake Zurich, and he had a little summer house right on the water's edge, and there were many swans there. And I was getting up at the end of a conversation with him, and we were beginning to walk back to the main house, and I said, "Isn't it true that swans are monogamous?" And he said, "Yes, they are." He said, "Do you know, I have had most interesting relationships between these swans, and many of my female patients who thought they were homosexual." And Jung wasn't a sexual snob. I mean, he understood all the legitimacy of all kinds of sexual variations. But he said it has been a point of departure for our discussions. He said it's a very funny thing that when they begin to mate, they start fighting. And they don't know what it's all about, and then suddenly the fight turns into lovemaking. So that's what I mean. Underneath opposition, there is love. Underneath duality, there's unity. The Tweedledum and Tweedledee agreed. But it's crazy. But that's the way it goes. 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 See, here's that weaving principle. The things hold together by over, under, over, under, under, over, under. And that creates a stuff, it creates fabric, it creates clothing, it creates shelter, it creates what we call matter. Matter, mater, mother, and also the same word, maya, illusion. See, the world as a marvelous illusion. It's crazy, but that's the way it goes. 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 It's crazy. That's the way it goes. It's crazy. That's the way it goes. A marvelous illusion. A marvelous illusion.
marvelous illusion.
But that's the way it goes. It's crazy. But that's the way it goes.
A marvelous illusion.
But that's the way it goes. It's crazy. That's the way it goes.
You're listening to Akira the Don, artist, DJ, wavelord, and architect of the Meaning Wave universe.
You all had a tremendous humor.
And he knew that nobody can be completely honest. You will try and have a great deal of success exploring your motivation, your dark, unconscious depths. That nobody can be completely honest. You will try and have a great deal of success, but there will be a certain point at which you will say, well, I've had enough of that. Do you see how, in a strange way, there's a certain sanity in that? When a person indulges in a certain kind of duplicity, of deception, there is something, you all laughed when I said that. There was something humorous about it. And this humor is a very funny thing. Basically, humor is an attitude of laughter about oneself. There is malicious humor, which is laughing at other people. But real deep humor is laughter at oneself. Now, why fundamentally do you laugh about yourself? What makes you laugh about yourself? Isn't it because you know that there is a big difference between what goes on the outside and what goes on the inside? That if I hint, you see, that your inside is the opposite of your outside, it makes people laugh, if I don't do it unkindly. If I get up in the attitude of a preacher and say, you're a bunch of miserable sinners and you ought to be different, nobody laughs. But if I say, well, after all, boys will be boys and girls will be girls, and we all know, then people laugh. Nobody can be completely honest. You will try and have a great deal of success exploring your motivation, your dark, unconscious depths. That nobody can be completely honest. You will try and have a great deal of success, but there will be a certain point at which you will say, well, I've had enough of that. Now, you see, what's happening when we do that? Now, I passed you around a lot of embroidery to look at before we started. And I'm perfectly sure that you got the point. That there's a big difference between the front and the back. In some forms of embroidery, the back is very different from the front because people take shortcuts. In the front, everything is orderly, and it is supposed to be kind of messy on the back side. See, which side will you wear? You've got to be sure you get the front in front, have the back in the back. The back has all the little tricks in it, all the shortcuts, all the lowdown that people don't acknowledge. And it's exactly the same with the way we live. You know, like sweeping the dust under the carpet in a hurry just before the guests come. I mean, we do ever so many things like that. And if you don't do it, if you don't think you do it, and you think, well, really, my embroidery is the same on both sides, see? Well, you're deceiving yourself. Because what you're doing is you're taking the shortcuts in another dimension, which you're keeping out of consciousness. Everybody takes the shortcuts. Everybody plays tricks. Everybody has in himself an element of duplicity, of deception. Because you see, from this point of view that I'm discussing, where the web is the trap, To be is to deceive. Nobody can be completely honest. You will try and have a great deal of success exploring your motivation, your dark, unconscious depths. That nobody can be completely honest. You will try and have a great deal of success, but there will be a certain point at which you will say, well, I've had enough of that. To be is to deceive. To be is to deceive.
Hi, David Hasselhoff, alias The Hoff. You're listening to Akira the Dog. Stay tuned, stay tuned.
So, in the same way, we find that the watching self, or the observing self, behind all our thoughts and feelings, is itself a thought. That is to say, when the police enter a house in which there are thieves, the thieves go up from the ground floor to the first floor. When the police arrive on the first floor, the thieves have gone up to the second. And so to the third, and finally out to the roof. And so when the ego is about to be unmasked, it immediately identifies with the higher self. It goes up a level. Because the religious game is simply a refined and highbrow version of the ordinary game. How can I outwit me? How can I one-up me? So, if I find, for example, that in the quest for pleasure, the ordinary pleasures of the world, food, sex, power, food, sex, power, all this becomes a drag, and I think, no, it isn't there, so I go in for the arts, literature, poetry, music, and I absorb myself in those pleasures, food, sex, power, and I absorb myself in literature, poetry, music, those pleasures, food, sex, power, and I absorb myself in literature, poetry, music, food, sex, power, literature, poetry, music, food, sex, power. And after a while, they aren't the answer. So I go to psychoanalysis. And then I found out that's not the answer. I go to religion. But I'm still seeking what I was seeking when I wanted candy bars. I want to get that goodie. Only I see now that, of course, it's not going to be a material goodie. All material goodies fall apart. But maybe there's a spiritual goodie that's not going to fall apart. But in that quest, the quest is not different from the quest for the candy bar. Same old story. Only you've refined the candy bar, made it abstract and holy and blessed and so on. So it is with the higher self. The higher self's your old ego. And you sure hope it is eternal. Food, sex, power, I absorb myself in literature, poetry, music, those pleasures. Food, sex, power, I absorb myself in literature, poetry, music, those pleasures. Food, sex, power, I absorb myself in literature, poetry, music, those pleasures. Food, sex, power. instead, therefore, if we see that you can't outwit yourself, you can't be unself-conscious on purpose, you can't be designedly spontaneous, and you cannot be genuinely loving by intending to love. By intending to love. Either you love someone or you don't. Either you love someone or you don't. If you pretend to love a person, you deceive them and build up reasons for resentment. You say, well, I ought to be honest. That's the beginning of, oh, so many lies you can't imagine. So many lies you can't imagine. Either you love someone or you don't. Either you love someone or you don't. Like when I hear a lot said about love, a big love thing on. Everybody's got to love everybody. Everybody sings songs about love. Do you know what I do? I buy a gun and bar my door because I know there's a storm of hypocrisy brewing. I buy a gun and bar my door because I know there's a storm of